Hi, everybody, and welcome to another thrilling episode of the Classic Universal Horror Podcast. I am your host, Jay Jennings. I am a Classic Universal Horror collector and historian, and this is the show where we discuss all things Classic Universal Horror. And today we have a special show because today's show is all about, as you can see behind me, busts and masks, at least on my end, but our guest is a mask collector extraordinaire. One of the best collections I've ever seen. He's got a popular YouTube channel, and we're going to talk to him and find out how he got all his great Universal monster masks and some other ones as well. But enough about that. Let's actually meet him. Here's Rudy Muniz, monster mask collector extraordinaire. Hey, Rudy.
Hey, everybody.
Wow, look
Good to
at
be here.
that. Who'd you bring today?
Got a few friends here in the room.
I can see. Wow, that is fantastic. Are you in your dungeon?
I'm out of the dungeon, and there's probably 300 more heads that you cannot see in this room. It's pretty amazing to walk in here, be
That is
surrounded
fantastic.
by
When you host your YouTube show, you kind of do it from that same location, don't you sometimes?
exactly same direction right behind me here, shooting with a GoPro, so you see some of it. And if people are lucky, I'll walk around with the camera at times and show them different areas of the collection. So
Wow, no, we're honored to have you, and I got a couple questions for you, and then you can showcase your mask. Maybe if you can grab one and tell
yeah.
us about it. This is a special show about Universal horror masks, obviously, and I guess that my first question right off the bat, where before we even get to masks, is I take it that you were first a classic Universal horror film fan first, like when you were a kid, you watched the movies on TV.
Exactly. My father and I would watch a lot of the classic Frankenstein films, and we were avid fans of Svengoolie, who I still watch him today. And just all those great monster movies really grabbed me as a young kid, and obviously stuck with me my whole life. And Halloween played a big part of this too, wanting to be that monster that I grew up watching on the screen so much as a kid.
Right. Now let me ask you, what was your first, like my first one, let's see, where is he? I think that Bride of Frankenstein was one of my first ones that I ever got. So what was the kind of the first Universal classic horror mask that you got, or first few ones?
First mask, I mean, you have to go back to the late 70s or early 80s. It would have been a Don Post Studios Mummy B mask, it was called. There were Mummy A masks in the 60s, and later in the early 70s, you had the Mummy B style. Um, so it had to be an early Don Post Mummy, would have been my first Universal monster mask at the time.
Wow, yeah, and I know since then you've accumulated quite a bit. And I'll ask you about A versions and B versions, and we've got, and then there's also, I guess, smooth versions and different hairstyles. So I mean, we're talking. I mean, you just don't collect one. I know you collect. If you have one version, that's not enough. You need to have more than one. Right.
Right.
When did you first become aware of monster masks in general? I know I did when I was a kid from reading Famous Monster, Forey's magazine. When did you first realize there was a whole world of monster masks?
It was the same thing, Famous Monsters magazine, and Fangoria. I'm 52 years old, so I was born in 72. Uh, Definitely went, headfirst in the Fangoria world, but at the same time, I had older cousins that had a lot of the old Famous Monsters issues, so we would be looking at those at the same time, and you'd see these classic Don Post ads in there, just pages full of these amazing masks that you're not going to see at your average, store. So seeing those high quality Hollywood style masks are what really grabbed me, and I wanted them so badly as a kid.
So did you order them through the mail?
No, because at the time your parents would not, give you 40, $50 for a piece like that. You were lucky to get a little plastic Ben Cooper mask at Halloween when you're 10 years old. And you'd show them like, I want that, mask on the wall, and it's 40, $50 in the 70s. They're like, are you kidding me? You're not getting that.
Did you
So,
collect? You collected a few Ben Coopers to start off?
oh yeah, a lot of those, a lot of the Ben Cooper masks in Collegeville, those little costumes, which we all wore. And they just didn't cut it though. They were fun, but man, you'd see those in the magazine ads, You're like, how do I get something like that? Like a Wolfman that actually had real hair. That was something that most kids would only dream about having.
Right. And let me ask you, when you first started out collecting, or when you got your first mask, you said it was that mummy version. Were you satisfied with that, or did you early on, did you already have it in your head? Like, I gotta get a different, I'm delivering newspapers, or or whatever I'm doing for extra, I'm mowing the lawn. Did you just want to stop at one mask, or right away at the early stages, did you think, no, I'm going to start a collection?
In the early days, they seemed so untouchable because they were so expensive for a kid. Even an adult, they were pricey for the time. So if you got one, you kind of knew like this is all I'm probably getting for a long time unless I really start saving my money. You just it was something that you better be sure you're asking for the right one because you're not going to be changing your mind later and have your parents buy you a second and third mask at those prices. It just wasn't happening.
So how did you first started buying and then accumulating? Is that different jobs you had? You just saved up?
Yeah, later on, way before Facebook was around, the internet was there, and there were groups out there where guys actually traded these masks. And with that and eBay, you learn like these things are actually out there. These masks I wanted so badly as a kid, they're popping up for sale, and it was kind of that what got me into really collecting masks was the internet because you'd go to different shops or flea markets and things like that, and you rarely see masks like this out in the wild. So it's kind of a real specialty thing to collect that would only surface, you know, on the internet. And before that, guys would read old magazines and find little newspaper, want ads to buy these things. They're so hard to get. You really had to know where to look.
Right. And what I find fascinating about your collection is you accumulated them long ago and you accumulated them now. And what's interesting about that is I mean, whether it's an old Don Post mask or a different type, we're talking Universal, and then they had the Don Post reissues. It's like you did the gamut. You didn't just want the reissues. You just want the old ones. Through your trading circles or through the people that you found out what was available, and like, well, look, I don't have that version. I'm going to get that version. So that's what I find that I'm envious of your collection is that you don't just stop at, if there's a different version that was done by somebody, like for example, we'll talk about you were friends or you acquired masks from the Tharps and the ladies and even the Don Post, the family from them. You just didn't get it from collectors. How did you start becoming friends and befriending these famous mask makers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I look back at how the collection morphed into what it is today. Um, Years ago, I decided to start an Instagram page. I'm like, well, maybe I'll just make one for the collection. And that started to grow tremendously. And the more attention it got, the more people from back in the day started noticing this collection of Don Post masks because the collection has always been a very Don Post heavy collection, like many great, great Don Post pieces. Um, and with collecting masks, if you're into it as much as I am, you're into the history of it, the people that worked at the studio back then, you know who they are, and then you find through all the years collecting, you meet a lot of old timers in the hobby that were there back then, and they were hanging out at Don Post Studios, and they know the people working there, like the Tharps that painted there years ago. You end up meeting these people that actually painted the masks you were wearing as a kid when you were 12 years old, and now you're able to have them custom paint things for you, and it really grew into a very exciting hobby that many people didn't even know existed.
Yeah, and we were speaking of the Tharps and the ladies. They've kind of slowed down or even retired. I think the Tharps have stopped completely. Right, and I think you mentioned it on your YouTube channel shows that the time to get you'd say, hey, they're taking their last orders. You better hurry up and order from them because once they're done, they're done, and the only way to find them then would be like an eBay or maybe from another collector because it's such the Universal Horror mass collecting. I think it's the monster kids who do this. I'm close to 60 myself, and they're not going to part with this stuff. If they are, they're going to ask for an astronomical amount, or maybe you can work out a trade. I'll trade you two masks, a Frankenstein and a Wolfman for your mummy, B version. So I think that's what you kind of did too, right? Kind of did some trading.
Oh yeah, I traded up a lot, and at that time when the Tharps were talking about hanging it up at some point, I'd say you guys don't realize, you're in a hobby where you can have the people that painted these things in the 70s and 80s paint you a brand new custom, Frankenstein monster right now, and it'll be the best quality you could possibly get. I go, once that is over, you guys are going to be wishing you bought more of those things, and those days are gone now, and guys are really wishing they bought more of them. That's for sure.
Yeah, and of course, even though this show is about classic Universal horror, obviously you collect other masks from different genres, other science fiction monsters, and other classic film company monsters and stuff like that. You don't just stick to one. But that brings us to maybe if you can show us a few of what you have sitting there in the background. Why don't you show us some of those those Karloff Frankensteins you have over your right shoulder?
Yeah, these are what I was just talking about. These were castings that I had sent to the Tharps, and those of you that don't know who the Tharps are, they were husband and wife that worked at Don Post Studios. Rob Tharp started painting at Don Post like in the mid 70s, like 75. And they were there all the way up until 2012 as, two of the head painters for Don Post. So you'd get these beautiful castings, send them out to them for, these amazing paint ups. Of course, I had to get several colors and
Right. You need
different
the green one too. Yeah.
green, and there's a gray one over there, and I got matching hands for these. But I had a friend of mine, Dante, do this amazing hair work on them, and they're all foam filled. And these are definitely keepers. Like I wanted these beautiful Karloffs done by the Tharps because I knew one day you're not going to be able to get these anymore. And that kind of leads into collecting masks. So I wanted to talk about where, as a kid, I had lots of models and action figures and toys, but until you actually have, the monster's head in your hands like this, like a very highly detailed version of it, it's a feeling like nothing you've ever had in your childhood. Maybe a Halloween masks, but something this detailed and this beautiful, that just grabbed me big time. And as a collector, obviously it's something I stuck with, and it took off. And I'm a very passionate collector of these masks now.
Oh, of course you are. And then thanks for showing those too. We'll be able to show some more as we continue. So I can see you have them custom made, and or you have the mask comes as is, and then you just have it upgraded. There's a term that they use for it. Um, that when you get a mask and you want more lifelike, you'll send it to a professional painter, and he'll make it more realistic. And I think you did that with a lot of yours, didn't you?
Oh yeah, a lot of custom pieces here. Um, and sometimes you'll run across things that were customized in the 80s by the same people, by the Tharps. So I like finding old original masks because back in the day, they weren't, as expensive as they are now, and they weren't that special, and they were easier to get. So they would send them out and have guys touch them up and paint them up nicely. Some are so rare now you wouldn't even think of painting over the original finishes. But it's cool to find customized pieces that were, done in like the early 80s like that.
Right, and unless they're falling apart or they suffer from that orange kind of rot,
Yeah,
you wouldn't mess with it.
right.
I had a couple masks that I had redone because of that orange rot, or just it's not even rot; it just turns orange, and I'm not a big fan of
Oh,
oranges.
the rut. They
So
call it
tell
the
us about
rust.
your rot stories.
Yeah, the 98 reissue calendar masks from Don Post have this strange rust, they call it. And like UV lighting, the clear coat they used on those masks interacted with the UV light, and they rust, they turn brown. Very ugly.
Right.
So yeah, unless they were
Well,
kept in the dark all these years, you're going to get that rusty appearance.
right. I used to have some before I sold those. Yeah, those reissues. If you weren't lucky enough like you were to to know these original Dom Post employees who made the masks, the reissues were good. They served its purpose for a couple $100. You went and you ordered them from the studio, and then of course you could even on eBay or some of the other auction online sites you could find it. Now they're just even though the ones with the orange rust on it, they're asking for way more than it. It almost has this kind of appeal, or this kind of it's been oversaturated. So I think some people think they have the Holy Grail, but no, the originals from the '70s are the Holy Grail, right?
Right, right, exactly. To me, the old, like the old Karloffs from the late
Yeah,
'60s.
grab one, show one.
To me, that is the Holy Grail. Grab this guy here. And
Wow.
the thing is, those reissue masks are very small. The
Yeah, they
98,
are.
98 reissue. This is, I mean, the full size jumbo Boris Karloff Frankenstein monster. The way it was, this is a 1969 Karloff, and this is big and beautiful. The 98 is going to be so much smaller than this. So that's one thing, the size. But this is so rare. I've never even seen another 69 in a collection, especially this quality. This is a pretty beautiful original mask with its original paint finish. That's to me the holy grails in this collection are the vintage Frankenstein monsters.
Right.
Those are the things I really go out of my way. If one surfaces, I'm going to be the guy offering, as much as possible to get in this collection because they do not surface hardly ever anymore.
No, you're known to hop on a plane.
Yeah, 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 right. So,
Let's, yeah. No, I get it. That's your Holy Grail, is those late '60s, early '70s ones that you just really cannot. Maybe one in a lifetime will pop up.
and like, latex rubber was not built to last. So to find a latex rubber 1969 mask like this in this condition, is hen's teeth.
Right.
Luckily, it was stuffed with newspaper or something for decades, put away in the exact conditions where it would survive the test of time. And that's you're not going to see a lot of these just sitting in people's shelves.
Right,
So
and they all have that little something different about them. All the different Frankenstein's, version one, two, three, whether the extended forehead or the pushed in lips or the side jowls go in. There's something. They're not all the same. There's something different about each one.
they kept making these well through 83 and like 1988. They got smaller, they got shorter necks, and this nice flat top here kind of started getting domed looking over time as the later ones came out. So to me, when you find the old late 60s and early 70s Karloff Frankensteins, they're incredible.
Yeah, there's
It's hard to
nothing
top.
compares to them exactly. Why don't you show? I want to talk about the Glenn Strange Frankensteins. What's so interesting
Sure.
about them? If you can grab one, because
Yeah.
there's so many different versions. There's the pop marked one, and there's the smooth surfaced one, which is my
Yep.
favorite. I love the smooth one. Show us a couple of strangers that you got.
So I'm glad you brought up the smooth version too. I've got
That's my
both,
favorite. I love the smooth strange.
got both of them here, and the smooth has a very unique story behind it.
And that's by the Tharps, right?
Well, first, this is an old casting that's very rare. Let me
Wow.
set him down first. So, in 1966, actually, can I grab a different
Yeah, go
one?
ahead.
There's so many.
No, there's something about the Glen Strangers. They stand on their own. It's like you just don't collect one of them. You have to have two, three, four, five. There's something about that Glen. He's getting more love, way after his death in
Exactly.
mask form than he ever did.
So, I would have to say, people say, "What's your favorite mask?" And it's so hard to answer. That's like saying, "What's your favorite horror film?" It's
Right.
hard to say, but one of them would be the 1965, 66 Glenn Strange Frankenstein. This would be the one, if you monster guys are familiar with the famous Don Post monster calendar from 1966, you'll see a picture of the mask, and a lot of the cracks are painted in black. There's a lot of detail in the one they photographed. So that is what they call the calendar monster mask because it's in that monster calendar from 66. Those wearable Glenn Strange Frankenstein masks, they only made them through the mid to like almost late 60s. And those are so rare. It was sculpted by Pat Newman, who sculpted most of the really great, monster masks of that era. Her and Vern Langdon were making these incredible Universal monsters at the time. And this casting actually came out of their original 60s mold. They quit making them, I think, in 67 or 68, but that old mold still stayed around the factory for years. And this is one of those castings out of that plaster mold. But it's these full-size Glenn Stranges are, to me, if I could find an original one of these, it would be, a pinnacle piece in this collection.
I mean, it looks like it's his head, like he's a live person. That's just
Right.
incredible. Yeah.
That look, like Abbott Costello meet Frankenstein when
Right.
he's, they open that crate and he's laying in there. That's the details. Unfortunately, over the years on plaster mold, the details wear out quickly. So when this was cast in 1983 out of that 60s mold, it doesn't have all that great detail it should have, but it's still unbelievable to have this sitting here in this collection, because the original masks are. I think I know of one that exists out there, and that's about it. Um,
Right. And then,
speaking of
yeah, go ahead.
speaking of Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, let me put this down carefully.
There's a lot to look at, even when you're away from the camera.
So Don Post, you remember in the movie when the monster is on fire at the end on the
Right.
pier, the prosthetic face appliances at that scene, Don Post molded that, okay, and they made what's known as the smooth Frankenstein
Hmm.
mask from casting the appliances, and they're smooth because it was part of that. If you study that scene where he's on fire, you'll really see the likeness looks a lot like this.
That's my favorite Glenn Strange right there.
Yeah. So that's how this mask came to be, was molding those movie appliances from that scene, and they dubbed it the Smooth Frankenstein. He's, compared to the others, he's pretty. I think they call it that because he's pretty smooth looking. Obviously.
Because he doesn't have the rigidity kind of cheekbones. It's smooth like a
Right.
skin. Yeah.
And Don Post made some sets of that. I don't know if you could see. Let's see here. You see that?
Yeah.
The flesh-colored one with the matching hands. That is the 1973 smooth Glenn Strange set that you could have bought. Actually, that was bought at the Disney Magic shop in '73.
Oh
That's
man, they did sell masks back then. They did.
yeah. So they had that mold, and then another mystery mold was made at the time off the same appliances, and that's where this mask came from. So
Now,
basically,
is that kind of bluish tint on the cheeks done purposely?
this was painted by a very famous special effects artist by the name of Rick Stratton. Back in '81 or '82, Rick painted this. Around the time he was probably working on Fright Night or one of those, so that was probably '85. But he was working on all these Hollywood films at the time, and he painted this for a friend of mine. And it was more of a flesh-colored paint job with light blue, but it's got a nice patina to it now. Like,
Yeah. Well, the blue has a kind of a ghoulish, dead zombie look to it.
for sure. And one thing, Stratton, I've got many masks painted by him from that time, and he was a master makeup artist, so he understood shading and stuff a lot differently than your average mask painter. So the masks he painted really have great looks to them, and they stand out next to all the others of the time.
Right. No,
He
you showed off your Glenn Strange on some of your episodes, and yeah, you
yeah.
have like a row of them, cases of Glenn Stranges.
Right. One other piece that Stratton painted at the time was a Lugosi casting.
Oh, let's see that.
It's a very rare casting, but he also
Oh,
painted
that's nice. Yeah.
this is a very rare casting that they were putting out in the '60s, and then they had to stop making them, so they couldn't sell them anymore. But
Well, I'm
that
sure
cast,
the estate kind of got word on that. Yeah.
yeah, they ended up not making them, and then I think somewhere behind the scenes in the early '80s, the mold was pulled out of Don Post Studios. There were guys doing that at the time, making custom castings behind the scenes, and that's how this came to be.
And if you
Straight
knew those people, you lucked out.
right. And if you're lucky in the year 2025 and know how to find them,
Wow.
the end of the year,
That's like hitting the lottery, definitely.
these beautiful pieces. You will not find another thing like that. A rare piece painted by Stratton back in the day. That's a unicorn right there. So
Right.
that's the kind of stuff I really love acquiring is things like this.
Oh, those are museum pieces for sure. Let's see if you can grab another one that they did in A and B. If you can grab maybe the two Wolfmans back there.
Yeah,
Because one is actually, I think, supposed to be the Wolfman, and the other ones are supposed to be from the other films, like Abbott and Costello, Meet Frankenstein, and House
right.
of Dracula. So there's two different ones. So unless you're really a big fan of Universal Horror, you go, what's the difference? Well, because they're two different masks, two different makeups.
So the reason there's an A and B mask, like if you're familiar with those '98 reissues,
Right,
Wolfman A, Wolfman B, Mummy A, Mummy B. In the '60s, they did the calendar masks in the mid '60s, and the original '60s masks were very small. Like they weren't fitting people very well. People would complain. So around 1969, Don Post said, let's resculpt these monsters and make bigger versions. And that's where the B masks came from. I have a very rare 1966 calendar Wolfman A sitting right here.
wow.
Um, it's a rare two-tone hair version. And if anybody is familiar with the film Orgy of the Dead,
Ed
um,
Wood.
Ed Wood's film, you will see one of these. The guy's got the hands on, and the hair is nice and bushy, and he's got that mask, and it's pristine in that film because it was that. I think that was from 1967, maybe. But this is that exact mask. The calendar. It's called the Calendar Wolfman, um, which I have. I happen to have another casting.
Right.
So this is also. Let me just carefully grab this.
I think
The
that's the
thing,
one that we all remember.
these are very brittle, so I got to be careful.
Right.
This
I
is the same
appreciate that.
same sculpt, but this is a more complete. Wait, which one? This one. Sorry, there's a little delay, so it's this one here. Same sculpture, but not as. This one's a little damaged. Like the bridge of the nose is kind of squinty. This is what he should look like. This is cast out of the mold in the '80s, the '60s mold.
And that's the Lon Chaney look, obviously.
Correct. So then, like I was saying, there's an A and the B.
Yeah.
I'll show you the Wolfman B next, which was his replacement. And I think a lot of you people watching this will recognize this mask a lot more. at least, at least the style of the sculpture.
Right.
A lot of monster kids probably wore this in the '70s.
With that funky hair.
Yeah, this one's got like an orange colored hair to it, but a lot of them were darker brown. But this is the good old Wolfman B. Don Post sold a ton of these over the years, and matching hands. But these things are so. Even this one is hard to find original. And if you do find them, they're usually busted because this latex is hard as a rock. So finding a nice Wolfman intact is very, very difficult.
Yeah, I think all of us when we were younger, it was like you had to have A and B
Right.
if
Yeah.
you
If
could
you
find it. Yeah.
parents were generous.
Right. If you lived
Mine.
up on the hill.
Here's another beautiful Wolfman B cast in the '80s out of the factory mold.
Oh yeah.
Custom eye inserts, just gorgeous though. You can see how different they can look from one another. Just by different hair work and different colored hair. So
Right.
you'll see a lot of different looks to that Wolfman B out there.
Because the problem I had with all different companies that try to do, well, they couldn't call it the Wolfman because of the copyright. It was a werewolf mask. And they just
Correct.
tried to do a poor man's version of that, and it just didn't look good at all.
Oh, they can look pretty bad out there.
Right, right,
Yeah, the other Wolfmen out there. You're like, that's not the one from the movies.
right. Now, speaking of the mummy, while we're talking about that, you got that one over your right shoulder. Was that A or B, or which one is that?
That is a B, and that is also a B up
Oh yeah, there
there.
he is. Yeah,
Yeah,
well, the
two
one with
different.
the wandering eye.
Yep. Yeah, this one is the one with the hands up there. Basically the same sculpture. Late '60s. There's a late '60s mask, but those hands, I'll grab them in a minute. Those are extremely rare mummy A hands, like the calendar mummy hands from the '60s. There may be one other pair I know of that to exist than those. But if you bought '60s hands in the '60s, in the mid '60s, it would have been them from Don Post Studios.
Right, and the Cheney there, if I'm not mistaken, it's Mummy's Curse, Mummy's Ghost, kind of all into one because he looks similar in some of those he made when Cheney made four of those movies, but I think that's the one everybody remembers.
Karis.
Caris, yeah.
And it's funny, I was, if any of you saw my Collector's Call episode, I made a crazy, huge mistake on there because I was so fried out from filming that show. We shot it down here in the mask room, and I had, I think that was the mask on the table. So I'm standing behind it, and the hands were there, and I got, the cameras are all in front of me, and Lisa Welsh's standing next to me, and we're shooting the scene, and they go, cut. And we're standing there and they go, okay, now what film is this from? And I go, The Mummy. I'm not thinking straight at all. And then later that night, I go, oh no, that's Karis. That's not from The Mummy. It's not the night. Because they picked up and said, okay, now take it from the top, say from the 1932 Boris Karloff classic, The Mummy.
Yeah, and you should have said, wait a minute, hold on.
So I go, okay. I'm like, oh, because they're smiling, they're filming. I go, okay, it's from the 1932 Boris Karloff classic, right? I called my friend that night. I go, man, I made a huge mistake. I was sweating. I go, I called Karis. I said, Karis was from The Mummy, and guys are gonna crucify me. He goes, nobody's gonna pick up on that.
Exactly, no one will, exactly.
I go, just every Universal guy that watches watches that show, and that happened later. Guys were talking about it in a group. I go, listen, I know my mummies, but it was
It was an
funny.
8-hour shoot, it was late.
Yeah, it was fun though. It was a great episode. But yeah,
Right?
I made a crazy mistake on there, and I addressed it online. I'm like, I know
Not
my
a big
mummy.
deal.
Yeah, yeah, but it
So
was it was
you show us that other one too?
this one here.
Oh, the other one that's behind you? Or is that,
Oh
is
yeah,
that,
I'm gonna grab that because I want to show you
okay.
those hands. Those hands are something you're probably not gonna see anywhere else. Um, these are very, very brittle,
Yeah.
very.
Wow, look
First,
at
I'll
that.
first I'll show you these because I can't hold all three at
That
once
is
here.
crazy.
Let me yeah. If any of you have the Illustrated History of Don Post Studios, the book, the big thick Don Post book by Lee Lambert, this pair of hands is photographed in that book along with that head. But these are the real deal '60s hands. So if you got the Mummy calendar, you will see. Carefully do this. You'll see the Mummy kind of standing there with the mask on. He's kind of posed with his hands, kind of like this,
Right?
and that's these hands. Of course, they're painted white looking and they're bright. These are totally aged, but these are the real, '60s rubber, and they were foam filled back in the '80s. One thing we do to preserve all of these masks and these hands is a foam filling process.
Right.
If these were not filled back in the '80s, these would not be here today. They would
Yeah, they would
they,
probably fall apart.
they would disintegrate. I have another spectacular couple of sets of hands here I want to share with you before we're done.
All right.
So let me get the head now.
It'll kind of look like Ben Grimm thing hands.
Yeah, this head had some restoration work done to it years ago, but this is the real late '60s Mummy B.
Yeah, look at that.
Let me try to get him up here so you can see him in detail. And
That is lifelike, definitely.
oh yeah, just to have the hands with it, because one thing you have to remember or realize is, you're a kid, you're lucky to get the mask. If you said I want the hands too, they're like, no, you don't need that. They didn't want to spend the extra money for the hands. So a lot of kids never got the hands. They just got the mask, and hey, you be happy you got the mask. So the hands are very rare in the collecting world. I have a lot of great classic Don Post masks with the matching hands. So that's a big part of this collection is the sets of hands over there with in the glass cases with all the masks.
Right, yeah.
You know,
Almost like they're standing there, standing up with their hands up.
yeah, right. They're all like got their hands behind them or next to them, and that's something you definitely don't see in a lot of collections are the hands.
Right. And then, of course, we haven't even shown. You even have some full size monsters.
Yeah, there's full size Frankenstein monsters. There's a full size Barbara Steele over here from Black Sunday with the rib cage. It looks so neat in this collection room. So
Right.
lots of great things in this collection that unfortunately you won't see here. But if you go to my Instagram later, you'll be able to see a lot of photos of all the stuff.
Did you happen to bring out a Dr. Niemann, a Mad Dr. Karloff, or is that somewhere else?
I've got the
That
grandfather.
special one that nobody has, that one that looks like Karloff is standing right in front of you.
Oh, I have the Gorka here. Um, from the Wurlak.
Yeah, the
Word
Wurdelak from Black Sabbath.
right here. He looks really. Look at that.
Wow.
So this one
It's
was
similar.
sculpted.
Actually, the Dr. Niemann is similar because a lot of the
Yeah.
Karloff masks look like Karloff.
Oh, I do have the '60s version. Let me grab it
Yeah, go
because
ahead.
it's extremely rare. Hold on. Sorry about that.
No worries. We're just
So
taking all the stuff that we're looking at.
I've got so many masks on my mind. Yeah. So I've got something pretty spectacular here. I got to show you. This one. This is the calendar Mad Doctor. So if you were to buy a Mad Doctor from Don Post Studios during the calendar era, which is the mid '60s, this is that mask. But this one happens to be cast from the master mold, the master from the studio, which a production master, if they've sold you a production mask, meaning they produced the masks for retail sale, they're out of a smaller mold.
Right.
This is a rare casting from the studio master, from around 1983 or so. They took that '60s master, and somebody out there, that was into this stuff back then, got their hands on the master, had this, painted up by Rick Stratton again, and this is a crazy rare piece.
Oh my gosh! Because if anybody knows, when you buy that, his hair is all over the place. It's scattered out like Albert Einstein,
Right, like
and
all,
his
yeah,
his beard is he looked like a disheveled homeless person.
yes.
But that's what the character in the movie actually looked like.
If you Google, Don Post Mad Doctor mask, you'll see different versions of it.
There's like a
The
hundred different versions. Yeah.
hair's all crazy, but this is a gorgeous,
You know what
rare
makes
cat.
it, Rudy, is the eyes, the custom made eyes.
And the funny thing is, those eye inserts were only put there as guides when they were sculpting the mask. They were meant to be cut out, but whoever got the castings like this left those in, and they paint them and they look amazing. So they weren't even meant to stay in the mask.
Yes, friend Rudy.
So this is one crazy rare piece,
That
of man,
is.
yeah. So beautiful. I don't know why I was showing you the Gorka mask first. I was like,
No,
yeah,
that's
Mad Dog.
fine, guys. Karloff is Karloff. No
Yep.
worries.
There's different versions of it. I have a '70s Mad Doctor right here. It's the only one I've ever seen.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
grab it
Let's see.
if you don't mind.
No, absolutely.
This one is pretty crazy. This is the only one I've seen in a collection. Very more generic looking, but with that long
Yeah,
beard
look at that.
and the
Kind of a
white hair.
Fu Manchu there,
Right, but hard as a rock.
right?
A lot of those '70s Don Post masks are going to be like this. The rubber just, unless it was really in the right conditions, the humidity or if it's too dry, the rubber dries out like that.
Is that the
But
glue from the wig around it?
yeah, that's the brown. The glue turns brown, and you'll see it on some of the Frankenstein monsters on the vintage Franks. And that used to bother me as a collector. I'd say, you can see that old glue, but now I love it. Like,
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah.
I like seeing that detail on the old pieces. It's just a characteristic of a mask from the '60s or the '70s. So,
No, it's an incredible collection, and sharing it with
thank you.
us monster kids is an honor to have you do that. Let me ask you. We talked briefly a little bit before the show. I think was it a year or two ago, or you were asked to take your collection on the road, and were you were the I guess the middle centerpiece at this convention where anybody who came in, they had this came to you and you would draw big crowds with your. It doesn't just take 5 or 10 masks on the road. They almost took your entire collection, right?
Yeah, I built. Eric Austin, who runs the show, it's called Mask Fest, and Eric used to run the website I was referring to earlier called the HMA, which is the Halloween Mask Association, and that was the old forums we used to hang out on. All us mask guys were on these forums that nobody even knew existed, and Facebook kind of took over all that stuff. But anyway, he came to me and said, "How would you like to do a display?" Because all these years at the show, I never did a display of my collection. So I said, "Well, I would love to, and if I'm going to do it, it's got to be pretty spectacular." So I built this crazy. He gave me a big space, and I built this huge display with, you know, lots of really rare things that people are never ever going to see um, unless they were in this room. So I wanted to bring stuff that was the rarest of the rare, and it was like the hit of the show. I think people were just going crazy over it.
Of course, it'd be the hit of the show. I mean, kind of like when Kirk Hammett from Metallica takes his kind of rarities on the road. You were able
Oh
to be a rock star for a weekend, huh?
yeah, I know. I'm actually gonna go see them in Tampa in a few days. So I got to see Kirk's collection of posters, and it is
Wow.
mind blowing, mind blowing,
Yeah,
just
yeah, I
crazy.
saw that. So let me ask you. So, as far as Universal Classic monster masks that maybe you haven't found yet, or you've been searching for, any holy grails that you hope to find one day in the near future?
There's always masks out there I'm searching for. Like I was saying, like the '66 Glenn Strange, that casting right there was made in '83 out of the '60s mold, as a prototype.
But do you want that original 66?
Exactly. I know where one is out there. It was foam filled too much, and it's kind of bloated like a beach ball. That's the problem. Is finding one in good condition is like hen's teeth. So there's things like that I'm always searching for. The original '60s Don Post masks. If anybody watching this has stuff like that, I'm absolutely a serious buyer, and I would love to add them to this collection.
Yeah, I don't think anybody else. I mean, there are other collectors, of course, but I don't think anyone is up there with your collection. And it's a museum, and it's going to be saved, preserved for eons. I mean, I don't think that's what you do when you're a collector. Like I collect autographs and busts. My whole point is, I tell my son every day, who's that? Who's that? Who's that? And he knows.
Yep.
So, I hope for the generations to come, to save it. And there's just things that you will not part with. Like you debate, my wife goes, it's either me or the bus. I'm like, don't make me make that decision, honey.
Right.
But so when you collect all these things, what I mean, do you go down to visit? Like if you haven't been down to your basement in a couple of days, you want to just get a refresher course. You go down there with a cup of coffee and just take it all in. What do you do?
I do that. I love to come down here and just stare at everything. Sometimes I'll say, "Oh, I got to sell some things to make room," and I'll come down here, look around for like a half hour, go upstairs, and shake my head like I just can't do it. Like I can't, I can't sell them. Once a year, I like to rearrange the entire room. Put all these masks on this side of the room and switch them around, and that's like walking into a whole new collection. Because if you look at everything in the same spot every day for the whole year, you're just like, I got to do something different. and so switching things around helps. And this collection is changing daily. It seems I'm always buying, older pieces or upgrading things I've got to nicer pieces and selling off some. I have to sell some stuff at some point. I know guys that have, three times the amount of masks I have.
Wow.
I don't want them in my bathroom and in my bedroom. There's stuff in the bedroom now, but it gets to be crazy, and other people live here and they don't want that. So
Right. Well,
you got to
one of the
pull,
right.
you
Let
know.
me ask you this as we wrap up, because this has just been overwhelming. I mean, I got to catch my breath, and my water. I've been taking sips. It's exhausting looking
Right.
at it. It's like almost being there with you on tour, as you're showcasing these masks. Let me ask you, what do you see as the future in the next year or two or the next decade of the genre of monster mask collecting? Unfortunately, obviously, there are reissues and there are redos, and they don't have the same appeal as a mask from the late '60s, early '70s. But where do you think the direction is going? Are they going to be more realistic? Are they going to tone it down? What's your take on the future of a monster mask collecting?
It's interesting that you asked that question because it's something I think about all the time. Um, I the Instagram and the Facebook and the YouTube videos I do are to always grab a younger audience and to keep this thing alive that I love so much, and that people that were here in the '60s reading famous monsters love so much. But you know what? We're all getting older as time goes by, and someday you're like, is this going to be around? Are these young guys going to like this? And it's crazy, but there are more younger mask makers popping up that I see that are sculpting Vincent Price characters, and it blows my mind that these young guys are still in love with this, and it really it's amazing, because I push it as much as I can on the younger crowd. Freddy's cool and Jason and all that, but man, check out these old vintage masks that you've never heard of, or watch these movies that are called Hammer films. Start getting into this weird stuff that are not familiar with, and it's catching on. And I love seeing these younger people getting into the '60s and '70s movies and characters. So hopefully there's hope for it all.
Right. No, I agree with you. I have some fellow collectors who are into, the alien. They have 20 different alien masks, and the
Yeah,
Freddys and the Jasons and the Michael Myers, and they're just not hip. They say, Jay, I can appreciate your collection and all that, but I'm more into '80s or '90s horror, Rawhead Rex and stuff like
yeah.
that. And I said, okay, I guess we can agree to collect what we want to collect. So let me ask you before we go, tell us about your Instagram and your YouTube channel where people could watch your videos?
Sure. Instagram. This is known as the Crimson Ghost Mask Room Collection. So if you go to Instagram, put in Crimson Ghost Mask Room, all one word, and you'll find me up there. Um, Crimson Ghost is from my love of the Misfits and their music, and of course, the Crimson Ghost cereal and all that. But YouTube is Rudy's World. You'll find all my mask videos on my Rudy's World channel, and that's the two main places to find me out there. I'm on Facebook, but most of my activity is going to be Instagram and YouTube.
Okay. Well, I tell everybody to go watch Rudy's YouTube channel and his masks and his cars and he does a lot of stuff.
Cars, yeah.
Thank goodness for Rudy because as I said, there's not a lot of us old timers out there doing this. So you learn
I,
from us and continue what we're teaching you, and then you can continue it on for the next generation. But Rudy, I can't thank you enough for coming
Thank you.
down. Did you enjoy our little talk?
I loved it. I loved it, and you younger guys out there, I like to teach a lot on my channel, but I also have fun doing it. Like I'm joking around a lot, but you'll learn a lot. So check it out.
No,
I'm grateful.
absolutely.
Jay, thank you so much for having me here. This was really fun. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Rudy. I appreciate it. And I just want to say thank you for all of you for tuning in to the latest episode of the Classic Universal Horror Podcast. I'm Jay Jennings. Please join me next time where we'll discuss all things Universal, Classic Universal Horror. And as I always say, Stay scared. Thanks again, Rudy. Take care.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.